Hello, this is Colin from the History Pilgrim. I hope you've been enjoying my videos and I'd be interested to hear your comments. Be sure to like and share with a friend. When you look at a map of the United States, there are 50 different states, each with their own unique borders and shapes. Some states such as Wyoming and Colorado are huge square boxes on the map, while other states such as Maryland and West Virginia have very weird shapes. Before the US reached its final count of 50 states, there were dozens of other possibilities which could have been on the map of the country today. In the vast windswept reaches of the upper Midwest lies a region more known for moose than men. The Upper Peninsula of Michigan is a long, rugged strip of land clinging to the southern edge of Lake Superior. If history had been different, the state of Superior could have been the 51st state. The seeds of Superior's possible statehood were rooted in the Upper Peninsula's odd geography. The Upper Peninsula is wedged between Lake Superior to the north and Lake Michigan to the south and connected to the rest of Michigan only by the Mackinac Bridge, which is a massive suspension bridge not completed until 1957. Before that, communication and travel between the two regions of Michigan was a logistical nightmare. In 1858, legislators in the region proposed the creation of a new state, Superior, which would have consisted of the Upper Peninsula. The main reason that Superior never gained statehood came down to politics and demographics. No state wanted to cede territory. Congress had little interest in creating another low-population state, which would have the same Senate representation as California. Geographically, the state would have a very strange shape. It would have been long and narrow and would have hugged the southern coast of Lake Superior. The state would have largely been covered by dense forests and would have been much closer physically to Canada than to the rest of Michigan. With the Upper Peninsula of Michigan being a region of the state which contains fewer than 300,000 people, if it were to become a state, Superior would have by far the smallest population of any state in the country. Its largest city would be a tiny capital more akin to a small town than a major city. With few urban centers, Superior would be a state defined by waterfalls, lighthouses, and endless forests. Economically, the state would likely struggle as it already does as a part of Michigan. Once a region rich in iron and copper mining, the Upper Peninsula is now known for being incredibly rural and having a shrinking population. If granted statehood, Superior would likely become one of the coldest and most rural states in the US, which would forever live in the shadow of its southern neighbor, Michigan. Nestled between Maryland and Virginia is the District of Columbia. Although Washington, D.C. is located in land donated by Maryland and Virginia, it is specifically meant not to belong to any U.S. state. In the past 2 centuries, D.C. has evolved into a dynamic city with a population of over 700,000 people, all of whom pay taxes to the federal government. The U.S., being a nation founded on the ideal of representative government, contains countless residents living in Washington, D.C., who have long lacked their own representation in Congress. They elect a mayor and city council, and they send a non-voting delegate to the House of Representatives, but they have no voting senators and no House members with legislative power. For many, this is a democratic contradiction. As far back as the 1800s, D.C. residents expressed dissatisfaction with their own lack of self-governance. In 1871, Congress revoked the local government and placed the city under direct federal control. Though revoked with the Home Rule Act in 1973, control over D.C.'s laws and budget are completely under the control of Congress. In the 1990s, proposals emerged to make D.C. a new state, named New Columbia. Congress held hearings, and in 1993 the House of Representatives actually voted on D.C. statehood as a bill, but it failed to get enough votes. If D.C. were to have become a state, it would strangely contain more residents than 2 states, Wyoming and Vermont. This would also make it by far the most democratic state in the U.S., with 2 senators from this state, which could drastically shift the balance of power in Congress. In the annals of American history, the story of the proposed state of Jefferson is one of the most curious. While its name evokes thoughts of the nation's 3rd president, it was not a state which bore his personal influence, but rather one which reflected regional aspirations and frustrations with a distant government. This state's proposal exemplifies the geographical and cultural identity, which can push communities to form independent states. Proposed in the 1850s, the region which would have become Jefferson was composed of parts of northern California and southern Oregon. This region, marked by mountainous terrain and a very sparse population, often felt disconnected from the far more populated areas to the north and south. In 1859, a group of frustrated settlers proposed the idea of a new state. Furthermore, the people in northern California and southern Oregon felt their interests were largely ignored in favor of larger population centers, which left them with very high taxes and lack of infrastructure. The desire for a separate identity was further fueled by the fact that the region was underdeveloped in terms of infrastructure. Roads were in very poor shape, transportation was extremely limited, and the only real industry was lumber. In 1859, the political movement gained traction. The name of a new state, Jefferson, was chosen. The name Jefferson was chosen because Thomas Jefferson was a proponent of an agrarian society and decentralized government. The movement faced immediate resistance from both California and Oregon, who feared a loss of territory and resources. While the idea of the state of Jefferson captured the imagination of many, it quickly became apparent that the political power to create a new state was simply not within reach. If Jefferson did become a state, its entire economy would likely have revolved around natural resource extraction, particularly lumber. Had this region been a state, it would have taxed its own industries rather than watching their profits vanish to Salem or Sacramento. This region might have had better infrastructure, possibly even a university tailored to forestry. However, with such a tiny population, Jefferson would likely be one of the poorest states in the whole country. In the arid expanses of the American West, beneath a scorching sun and between mountain ranges, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons, once envisioned a country of their own. This would not have been a state but its own sovereign nation. In 1849, just 3 years after the Mormons first arrived in the Salt Lake Valley to escape discrimination back east, the leader of their group, Brigham Young, proposed the state of Deseret. This territory would have governed all of modern-day Utah, much of modern-day Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, and California. Brigham Young and his fellow followers began to understand that the U.S. government would never tolerate an independent religious nation within its borders. Since secession would have required a conflict, statehood was instead proposed, as it provided the legal framework required for autonomy under the Constitution. The timing of the proposal of Deseret as a state occurred right after the end of the Mexican-American War, which ended with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which transferred huge portions of the American Southwest into U.S. territory. The Mormons who proposed the state of Deseret hoped that statehood would see success. The government in Washington, D.C. was not convinced. The U.S. government found the territory far too large for a single state. The Compromise of 1850 resulted in Utah Territory instead. In the early 20th century, Native American leaders from what is now eastern Oklahoma proposed Sequoyah, a state governed by 5 civilized tribes: Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole. After hosting a constitutional convention in 1905, they submitted a plan to Congress. It was denied. In 1907, the proposed state lost the chance for an opportunity of statehood. If Sequoyah had become a state, it would have stood out instantly from any other state. Sequoyah likely would have public schools which taught Native American history and language. Additionally, Sequoyah might have served a major force in U.S. Indian policy. The leaders of Sequoyah would have taken seats in Congress and helped propose Native American rights and federal land policies decades earlier, which would have led to more Native American tribes in western states having far more land and influence in the U.S. It is very possible that in modern times, casino tourism would have become the lifeblood of this state, something which has become an economic lifeline for many Native American tribes throughout the U.S. In the chaotic years following the American Revolution, what is now the U.S. was more a patchwork of alliances than a united front. During this uncertainty of governance and broader disputes over statehood, one state was nearly added to the Union, the state of Franklin, which was proposed as the 14th state in what is now eastern Tennessee. In 1784, North Carolina was lacking control over its western frontier, a mountainous region full of settlers who felt disconnected culturally from the rest of the state. This would have led to a future breakaway occurring in many other states in the region, from upstate New York to eastern Pennsylvania. This would have meant that the very idea of future state formation would have likely been much more fluid, leading to much smaller states established in western U.S. Because of Franklin's location within the Appalachian Mountains, it would have been less influenced by a plantation-based economy and would have become a Union-loyal state in the Deep South. The idea of Franklin as a state collapsed in 1789 under pressure from North Carolina. Eventually, it became part of Tennessee. Had Franklin joined the Union, it would have invested in infrastructure suited to its mountainous terrain and rural population. It would have eventually developed an economy based around tourism to the Smoky Mountains. In conclusion, the map of the U.S. today is a map which could have included states with strong regional identities and unique histories. From Superior to Jefferson, the ghost of these almost states whisper of a country which could have looked radically different. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to stay tuned for more history videos. Sincerely, The History Pilgrim.